Yeah, yeah. It's like
Wow.
welcome to Earth. Now we got to figure out how we can dance with these guys, right?
It's dance time. And a great question from the audience here is, Cliff, who's running the AI system? And is that going to be used for us or against us?
Okay, so AI is not as people think. There's no disembodied artificial intelligence that can latch onto your mind or get you or any of this kind of stuff. AI is one of our greater tools. AI is going to help us. There's software programs that are going to help us with our alien problem. The believe me, the technology is not anti-human, but we're going to have a weird level of information in order to defeat these guys. Because bear in mind, if we could blow out, say that we knew that there were 5 spaceships sitting out there right now circling the sun, and we could sign them up with our nukes and we could blow the hell out of them. That doesn't end our problem because there might be 10 or 20 million invaders already here. And we've got to deal with them because those invaders are going to keep going with their plans because they're telepathically driven to do so and have no other option. And we don't know what their plan is or why they're doing it. We can make all kinds of inferences. I've got notes and notes and notes, pages of these things about um, how to interact with them, how to plan war, strategic tests, so we can start probing them to figure out what's going on without letting them know that we know. All different kinds of things about this alien invasion. And it's like, basically, we're all in it now. As soon as you recognize you're in this war, you've got to participate because they're damn pod people coming to replace us.
So what if you're the pod people and you don't want to, like what if you wake up and you're like, damn it, I'm one of them?
Okay, so you're correct. Now, even I have compassion for these hybrids, okay, because they're partially us. They're partially human. They're telepathic. They're able to control us, but they are our cousins at least, but they're the direct, our DNA taken and stuff done to it. So I have compassion for them. And I think that there are things we could do, for instance, technically, that might build a barrier like the 5G that would prevent them from being controlled by the insects. Then who knows? They might willingly join us in fighting the insects, okay, because they might be free. We do know from the abductees that certain things happen at certain times that really freak out the insects and their minions. And these things that happen are usually humans or hybrids even. Well, let's deal with just the hybrids. The hybrids will get episodes in which they're uncontrollable and have to be, we would think of as like mentally sedated, okay? Where they don't give them drugs or anything, but a bunch of the insects get around them or a bunch of the minions get around them and dampen down what's going on in that hybrid's mind. What's going on in their hybrid mind is the reaction that's going on from the hormones being unbalanced, building up, within their vagus nervous system. And these beings have no skills in dealing with these hormone storms, right? So I don't mean it this way, okay? But I want to give you an analogy that most people will grasp and understand, but this is in no way being denigrating or anything like that, right? Even though it might seem somewhat funny. These beings, that the hybrids that have these episodes and bust out and become uncontrollable, it's as though they've got like an intestinal flu and they've got massive diarrhea and they can't contain it. And there's just this anxiety in them, and because of their nerves trying to get this stuff out of the body because the gallbladder and the liver and the intestines feel it's bad, and there's all kinds of bacteria in there, and your body just wants to get it out, right? It's like a dog that's been in the house too long and needs to go out and get empty and hasn't been allowed to. It's got that franticness to it. And this franticness is actually part of the vagus nervous system that is responding by dealing with serotonin and dopamine in particular ways. Bear in mind, the vagus nervous system is how the serotonin goes from your gut up to your brain and vice versa. It's the communications channel of these hormones. And so the early hybrids had vagus nervous systems that were more robust than the insects would have liked for control purposes. So it proves to me that the insects are not infallible. They made a mistake. They make mistakes all the time, even though they don't in their own mind admit that they're mistakes. They don't even have the concept of a mistake or an error, by the way. But under those circumstances, the hybrid would become uncontrollable because of a hormonal storm going on in them. Sort of like PMS, right? Where you just can't deal with the hormones and you start sweating and all of this kind of stuff. And humans experience this at various different times in our lives, and we have ways of coping and so on, but these guys don't even have a clue. And so they would dampen it down mentally. It doesn't go away, it just removes it at that point. And so they tried to engineer calmer, gentler, more easily controlled hybrids, and they had long since abandoned reptiles. Reptiles were one of their first attempts at this. Only reptiles never got them anywhere because they don't have a vagus nervous system at all. And the vagus nervous system, in my mind, is part of in my conclusions, is part of the necessary complex of things you've got to have in order to be able to have a soul go into a body, because of the way that the vagus nervous system connects the seat of consciousness, which is the pancreas, with the rest of the organs. And it's a long, involved discussion there.
Yeah, this is amazing. And it makes me wonder also about the stratospheric aerosol injections that we've been seeing, the cloud seeding, and a question from the audience. This is a question that somebody asked. Are they terraforming the planet? Are they geoengineering the planet? Is it them?
Okay, it's being done as a result of the invasion, but I don't know that it's being done because the aliens have got control of our military system and thus are doing it that way. The simplest explanation is that there is a means of disruption that is delivered via the chemtrails that dampens down on the ability to mentally control us from the space aliens. It may just be an attempt that way. Okay, it certainly has nothing to do with global warming at all. And the kind of crystalline metallic elements that they're putting up there, the military may think that it shuts down on the ability of the space aliens to do something. So it may be a strategic move that way. I do not believe that the terraforming aspects of things are coming through the chemtrails.
Thank you for that. And also, where'd that question go? There's so many people in the chat that I'm trying to find it. And even though I put it on slow motion, it's
yeah,
flying through here.
Yeah, sure, guys, sure, slow, yeah.
Yeah, so like you can actually you can slow it down where they can only leave a comment every 15 seconds, but with 3,500 people in the chat, all want to ask a question from Uncle Cliff here. So,
right.
It's interesting, Cliff, because the past week, I have been actually the past week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, I have been joking around about worshiping the unicorn god. And when it shits glyphosate rainbows, that's like, that's the best part, is the glyphosate rainbows that it lets go. And last night I turned on Netflix, and a new series that's on Netflix is called Happy. And it's about this detective that ends up not a detective anymore, and he's just kind of going rogue, but he has this near-death experience, and his daughter that he never met because he had a one-night stand, I never even heard about his daughter. Well, his daughter has an imaginary unicorn friend. His daughter gets kidnapped. The unicorn shows up to this guy, and he's like, hey, you got to go save your daughter. He's like, I got a daughter. I don't even know what you're talking about. It's so weird that, like, I'm watching this TV series, and all of a sudden, there's a, it's a good TV show too. It's I think it was originally on USA Today, and this guy's taking out bad guys, and he's going to look for this, creeping sicko that had kidnapped his daughter that he's never even met. But it's just so weird that, like, I've been talking about, rainbows coming out of unicorns and worshiping unicorns, and all of a sudden I'm watching this TV show last night about a guy that has a imaginary unicorn friend that, shits rainbows. I'm like, dude, you can't make this stuff up. Am I tapping into the universe, or is the universe tapping into me? What's going on, man? We're in the Matrix.
Well, see, so that actually brings up a very serious question, and that is residual effects on abductees. Okay, because imagine your situation if you were an abductee as a young child, and they're just simply reading your mind. They don't do anything to you. They just, you're going to be, they're figuring that, 20 years from now, you're going to get married. You're going to produce some kids. They're going to arrange that marriage because they're going to do things in your mind to join you up with a woman whose genetics they want to be joined with yours to produce this next generation of humans. Why they're breeding humans independent of breeding their hybrids and stuff, I don't know. We don't know why they're doing any of this. However, if you read through the abduction literature, you find that there's a whole series of symptoms of abductions that persist following the abduction period. Okay, so, and that is actually synchronicity at that level is one of the things that is continually reported as being highly acute and then fades over time following abductions. So this one guy, or one I think it was a guy. I've read so many of these, I can't tell anymore. Can't remember. But this one report was of a person who judged how recent their abduction experience was based on how frequent the synchronicities were. Actually, I think it was a woman, and at the moment, but she, the text was that the person would wake up in the morning, and if there were 3 or 4 synchronicities by noon, they had known that they were abducted the night before, because they have no memory of what goes on. And if they attempt to get a memory, they're one of those many, many, many millions of people that when they go to hypnotherapists or psychiatrists or whatever, and they attempt to do examination of what happened to them, they get headaches, blinding headaches that go away as soon as they stop thinking about it, right? As soon as they stop pursuing that memory, the headache goes away. And so this particular report was that this being, this woman or this guy would get up in the morning, and if there was synchronicity, some thought they had, and then 2 seconds later they see it on the newspaper when they get the newspaper from the apartment door, and then 4 seconds later they're looking at an ad or a few minutes later they're looking at an ad in the paper, and it relates to something that's on TV right at that moment. If they have those kind of synchronistic moments appear to them in mass, then they know that there's been a abduction the night before, and the synchronicity fades over the course of several days.
Now, I'm a little bit spooked out about that because I
didn't want to bring it up because
on a daily basis. Cliff, stop it! Help me, Mom. Right. It's okay. I've got Odin right here. Odin's hanging out with me. Deadpool and Thanos. So as long as I stay on Thanos's good side, I don't want to be one of the 50% that he makes disappear. If you've seen the new Avengers, you were gone. See ya.
But there's the issue about this. There's a number of different symptoms that persist, and you can find reports of these, and it doesn't necessarily prove you're an abductee or that you've been abducted, because these things can occur. And once you're sensitized to synchronicity, the human mind has a tendency to see the patterns that never before were revealed, right? First time you buy a car, all of a sudden you see that car everywhere, right? Whereas you didn't notice it a week before, but now you see everybody that's driving the same vehicle you are. And it's simply because you're sensitized to that shape now, you pick that pattern out more easily, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so these kind of things, though, have led to a vast level of literature, and I'm talking maybe hundreds of volumes. I know of 3 or 4 in Japanese and Chinese about mental exercises, techniques, tools, if you will, to examine and control your own mind. Many of these tools and techniques specifically went to the idea of controlling your mind against intrusions. And these intrusions were the space aliens taking people over. And so in ancient times, when there were flurries of abductions in some of these societies, and they were really consistent throughout Asia, up from about 900 AD, 900 current era, up to about 1600 in the Maunder minimum, although they did dampen off in the 1400s with the Sporer minimum. But these guys developed mental techniques for repelling. And if you look at the abduction phenomena, look how close it resembles possession. Look how close it resembles, getting involved with demons and all of this kind of thing. And the Druids, in fact, used to have concoctions that they made out of mistletoe. And deadly psychedelic if you don't know what you're doing, right? You got to be real. It's like the blowfish of psychedelics, right? You got to know how to cut that blowfish liver out and all of this kind of stuff, not to kill the person ingesting it. So you got to know what you're doing with this. But the Druids had psychedelics that they used that were out of mistletoe, like I say, that were specifically designed, the experiences were specifically designed to disrupt the possession by these beings, which they always said were sky people, just like the Salish here. And not space people, sky people, big difference. And they pursued those processes for almost 1,000 years. So for 600 plus years, really solid, the Druids were very active in the lands of the Celts and the Picts, and even in Germany, in the Pict population there. And that eventually became the psychedelic tradition of the witches and all of these people that were actively fighting against what they thought of as demonic possession, even though they were not in any way associated with the Catholic Church or any of this. And the Catholic Church later on came along and slaughtered them because it was under the control of the space aliens.
You know, what a great way to hide in plain sight and be like, oh, we're here to protect you. Oh, we're here because we're your savior. We're your salvation. And meanwhile, they're just sucking your soul right out and feeding off like a rechargeable battery oftentimes. It's insane. And at the same time, it makes so much sense that it's scary. It's like one of those things that makes too much sense. And you're like, wait a second, I can't even think about that. Or can I? I can think about it, but a lot of people won't, just because it takes them out of their comfort zone. And then they have to start putting up labels. Oh, you're crazy. You're a conspiracy theorist. I can't believe that. They're there to protect us. Very interesting. And a question from the audience here. Everybody keeps asking this question. And somebody just said, Clif's best interviews are on Leak Project. Thank you. I'll pay you later for that. They said, I love watching Clif. So Rh negative blood type. Your thoughts?
Okay, so Rh negative blood type is an aberration. All right. It is historically and scientifically should not exist the way it does within our population. The Rh negative may have been a response left, or may have been an indicator that was left over from a side breeding experiment that the aliens took with us. So I can't say if it was the Elohim or the Anunnaki. I don't think it was the bugs though, okay, because it occurred post-bug intrusion, so to speak, and then seems relatively isolated, even though it's within our population and spreading out. Rh negative is associated with a particular kind of an electrical response though. And so I find that interesting, that people with Rh negative blood deal with electricity in their body in a slightly different way than non-negative blood, right? And it has some health repercussions, but it also may have mental repercussions in terms of neuropathy and neural controls. So it might have been some other being's response to our species and thinking to themselves, oh, if we can put this into them, they will be able to be dialed in on our machinery, that kind of a thing. I don't, again, see, we're speculating as to the why, but we do know that it has some very interesting properties relative to blood and neurons that we don't see showing up in the larger general population.
You know, it's interesting also, they have more like the copper amount in their blood around electronics. They, you know, the lights will pop, radios will stop.
Well, we know that it's a interspecies kind of a thing because, you know, without these special hormonal responses, an Rh positive woman cannot bring an Rh negative child to term. In other words, and it's very brutal even when it does occur effectively.
Absolutely. And, you know, those shots that they give mothers with Rh negative blood, oftentimes because of the adjuvants in the shots, it can have bad side effects physically and mentally on the child, and also on the mother. It's unfortunate, but, you know, it's like one of those things that you would think that they would use an adjuvant that wouldn't be aluminum or thimerosal based. That's a whole other podcast. Maybe I wonder also if some of these people that have the Rh negative blood, it seems to be like they're oftentimes more telepathic. They're oftentimes more in tune with certain things. So maybe they were designed at one point, or maybe, you know, they were like the druids or wizards and sorcerers, etc. It's really neat to think about. But another question in the audience here, and I think this is actually one of the things we were going to talk about, was time. It seems like time is, are they messing with time, man? Are they
Okay, well,
twist it and-
we have to separate that. Okay, we have to separate our thinking. We have to be very hard-headed about thinking about time because we so understand so little of it. And so we can say definitively, yes, that everybody that is involved in the abduction and space alien invasion process has had their time affected. Okay, but it might entirely be mental, right? So I don't believe these beings in any way can change the general time, the nature of time itself. There are reports that these beings, that the insects have the ability to run time backwards in these little containers that might look, for all the world like something out of Star Wars with a hologram in it. Okay, and so it's a visual thing, and you look at it running back and forth, and it's not. The reports are that it's not a movie, it's not an image, it's actually the event itself being run back and forth, and you can make it appear inside this device. And so it would be like an encapsulation of a particular point on Earth and the events that happened. Theoretically, at least insofar as is being reported, they have the ability to capture images extra time, out of time, and replay them. But they don't have any ability to change time and put us all back 1,000 years or move time a millisecond even. However, within our brains, they have ultimate control. So here's an issue for you, right? I've got this this scar in the back of my ear on this bone. There's this bone behind your ear. Turns out, I didn't know it at the time, to be very associated with one-off abductee implants. So they find they don't find implants a whole lot in regular abductees. Those abductees that are taken for one purpose or another, for whatever purpose, but are taken for basically just one time, a one-off, do have implants in them. And I had one on the bone in my foot, and I had another one on the bone behind my head. The one in my foot, I didn't even recognize it as an implant, or no one did at the time it was surgically removed. And it was just sent off to pathology and determined to be benign around a foreign substance, a benign adenopathy, lymph gland basically that had formed around an unknown substance, and it was discarded. It wasn't cancerous. I didn't care. I was young. I didn't know what was going on. Many years later, like a decade later, after I had been exposed to some of this stuff and knew about the idea of implants, I noticed that I had for a number of years, and I couldn't say when I got it, this thing that was like small and like the size of a BB right on that bone. And it was very irritating. So one day I just decided I was going to have it cut off. Go ahead.
What part of the bone, like when you say bone, what part is it behind your ear? Or?
Correct. You're touching it right now, that hard bone right behind the ear there, okay? That forms part of the occipital well that the ear canal is in, that surface bone on the outside there. So I go to my doctor, and I knew about implants. I wanted to save it. I was convinced it was a space alien implant because I had had missing time. And I go to the doctor, he cuts it out. I have the scar. He holds it up. We both look at it. It's gray. It looks like a BB. He swears to me I was shot in the back of the head by a BB in my youth that penetrated deep enough under the skin to be totally sealed over with no scar or anything, because he couldn't find a scar, an entry point. And so it was curious when he was cutting it out. He says he couldn't find any entry point. And so, but of course he's saying, well, the scar went away, so whenever it was, as I was so long ago in my youth that I got shot in the back of the head by a BB, totally unaware of it. It penetrates under the skin heals up, and then some 20 years later or whatever, theoretically, I have it cut out because I suddenly notice it. And I'd suddenly noticed it like 3 months before, but had never in any part of my life ever discovered that. And even as a teenager going into puberty, where you're examining your body all the time, figuring out if you're normal and all this kind of stuff, I never discovered that I had this lump behind my ear. Even when you're told to wash behind your ears, you would think if you had a BB back there, it might be painful. So I suspect that it was much more recent. But even though all that was going on, even though I knew I wanted to keep it, he puts it into a little vial, and I have no memory of the rest of the visit with the doctor. The next time I went back and saw him, he was my regular physician at the time. The next time I went back and saw him, he had no memory of removing the thing from my ear. And when he read the report, which was my previous visit, he was shocked because he had made some notes about it. And then he said, well, we must have thrown it away. So what happened? Was there some kind of a mental block that we couldn't be allowed to examine that was put in at the time that the implant was put in? Who the hell knows? But I swear to you now, I've never been shot with a BB that's penetrated my skin, and never ever been shot with anything that I was unaware of. Right? Of course, if I was unaware of it, I wouldn't know I'd been shot by it, but there was never any evidence of it. And I've been shot plenty of times by plenty of things. So, so this was just a real curious thing. And this is turns out to be quite common, these reports of alien implants suddenly showing up. You're just suddenly aware of them. And yet in the process of getting them extracted, something goes wrong in everybody's mind and it's nowhere to be found later on. So there's no definitive proof or anything.
Was it as big as a BB or was it smaller?
Well, it was as big as a BB. It was not copper though. It was a mottled gray.
Left ear or right ear?
Left. Totally unaffected by being in my body. It wasn't corroded. Nothing had ever grown around it. It was entirely smooth, but there was 2 types of gray in it.
Wow. That's fascinating. It makes me think also, Wilbur Allen is a very intelligent person I've had on the show before. You know, he's been on Air Force One. He was, friends with Reagan. I've seen the plaque to confirm what he says. And he's got $100,000 worth of equipment where he'll film every single night and within the atmosphere. And he films these like cosmic tic tacs that just go, but it's within the atmosphere. So it's not like it's outer space. And he used to film them over the White House almost every night in a no-fly zone. Now he's moved. He still films them and he's in another state. Mm-hmm. And then he also said that he talked about a chip behind his left ear.
Yeah. And the left ear, I think because of its proximity to the speech center and other things. So the speech center is slightly on the left side of your brain. So there's all different kinds of questions that come out of this. It turns out that my experience with the implant is prototypical in the sense that usually you find them in one of the outer extremities, either the feet or the hands, behind the head, or in the heart. I've had plenty of x-rays and there's no sign of anything in my heart, but I have had the hand and then behind the ear. So who knows what? And I've had a period of time which was missing. I've had an episode that was 2.5 hours long in which I have absolutely no memory of the time and came out of it wondering basically what had happened with another person in the room. And we both came out of it at the same time, more or less, wondering what the hell had happened. It was just a spooky kind of a thing. But see, because it was only one off, because thereafter I started getting large dogs, okay, and having large dogs. So let me say that there's some things in the literature that go back even into ancient times, even back into about 1000 AD here, right? In which it is stated by individuals that were the victims of these abductions that the abductions did not happen if there were dog packs around, if the dogs were living in the house with the individual. And it turns out that other abductees in more modern times have made statements that when they're out and about with the space aliens trying to get them acclimatized to living in humanity, to be able to pass basically, right? As humans, that these beings are freaked out by large predators, that they don't think dogs should be allowed loose. They can't control them, and they can't control packs of them. Just like an individual hybrid could not control a pack of humans. It's too chaotic. There's too much going on. Their focus is not able to be spread out that way. And with large predators, especially pack hunters, lions, dogs, hyenas, coyotes, these kind of things, these beings are very much afraid of them. These beings are also very much afraid of physical violence. They threaten violence, they threaten to kill people, but there's no evidence they ever have. There's no evidence they've ever eaten any human. There's no evidence for the Dulce under the ground battle or any of that stuff, but we do have evidence that the memes that are represented within that Dulce battle are in fact replicated within the abduction language as well. But despite, like the grays having to take their nutrition in through their skin, that kind of thing. So we see these common themes that are replicated throughout there. But these beings they're only, and it's very powerful, but their only weapon is mental. So I don't believe they have guns per se, okay? I don't believe that they have any way of killing a human other than through a mental activity. They can cause that human to kill themselves. They could do any number of things to your perception where you did not see the cement truck that hit you, right? Because you thought you were on a field full of flowers. So they could do those kind of things. But I don't believe that they could, and actually I think they can do that very seldom because of the impact on them. Not that they're opposed to killing you, it's just that it has consequences for them at a neuropathological level. And so mass death is not their route. They're not going to nuke us or anything. And they're very much afraid of violence on a personal, physical level, to the point that they send security forces with their the hybrids that are intended to be integrated into our society. And even their security forces that are trained to do nothing but protect these individuals find it difficult to deal with humans and dogs in the same room, or go into a zoo. They would never take them to a zoo where there might be predators, because of the inability of them to be able to control the predators and the obvious fear that they get from the predation aspect of that being.
Yeah, this is just, it reminds me so much of it's called Childhood's End. I watched the
Yeah,
TV
yeah.
series,
Oh, I've read
and
the
they were
book. I've
scared
never.
of physical contact.
Yeah, I've never. I've read the book, never seen any movies from it or anything. But basically, see, a lot of these themes are a lot of these themes were taken by science fiction writers from history. Well, maybe they were in history for a damn good reason. A lot of the stuff you read about the Vaimani battles in the Mahabharata, okay, if you look at it with new eyes now, you can look at it from the viewpoint of, oh, look, there were abductions going on. These people were fighting battles in space over humanity. They were fighting for who got to control and harvest humanity. Okay, so it wasn't one part of humanity fighting for another with another part. It wasn't Brits versus the French. It wasn't New Zealanders versus the Chinese. What it was this group being controlled. This group of humans in India being controlled by this particular set of space aliens, fighting and dying for that group of space aliens against another group of space aliens with their human stooges as well. And so much of our history needs to be examined with the idea that it was not under our own volition. Now, there does seem to be a correlation. I'm going to have to go pretty soon, and my throat's starting to go and stuff here, right? So I'll have to break off. But I need to put out that it's sort of hopeless because we know so little about the aliens, but there are people that are thinking about this really fiercely in our military and in others. There's nothing to be done other than to strengthen ourselves as individuals and to strengthen your own mind and see where one might fit within this. Am I an abductee? Am I likely to be? Am I part of a clan that is? Do I have relatives that are? This might help you to be able to better acclimatize yourself to what the hell is going on. And then there's also this idea here that I needed to bring out. It may be that there's something about solar minimums, grand solar minimums specifically, that cause this activity to dampen down, other than the tendency of the human population to die down a bit during those times. Okay, it's hard to live, so we lose a lot of people. But nonetheless, there seems to be a huge reduction just before these two minimums back, 700 years ago and 400 years ago. And just before those minimums, the abductions, all the reports and literature just went way down, and we changed seriously. And a bunch of giant memes came out in history that hadn't existed before. And I believe they came out because the space aliens were not around. And I can go into that in the future, but that bodes well for where we are right now. It does mean that they're going to try and compete. The space aliens, in my viewpoint, are competing with their rising number of abductions and the amount of activity they're doing. They're racing against the onset and the impact of the grand solar minimum that we're going into now. And so they're probably going to ramp up whatever it is they're doing to try and reach their goals before they're clamped out. But I believe there is some kind of a solar system level something in the grand solar minimum that dampens their ability to do action. And that's about as far as I've got on some of that. There's vast numbers of stuff, vast amounts of stuff to read and to integrate in and to think about. And I'm quite certain after this show, because I know who watches your program, that I'll probably be contacted by some of the military guys. And I'd be quite happy to turn over my notes to them and let them have at it, right? They're going to have to establish to my satisfaction that they're human, though.
Now, you kind of, I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or be a little bit spooked out when you said, I know who watches your program, Rex. And now I'm probably going to get a knock on the door. So
be spooked out. And let's put quotes around the word spook.
I like that. I like that. It's a little spooky in here. But hey, I've met some amazing spooks, or have I? I don't know. It might not even be real. My imagination. Clif, I love you, man. And I thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm reading through the comments also. And one of the moderators said, Rex, this is one of your best shows ever. Please have Clif back on again soon. I know you're extremely busy, but hey, maybe we can do it again in a month or so.
We need to do this as frequently as universe will allow, because I don't think I'm interfering with the military. And I think I have a viewpoint that the military could not achieve with their structure, because I'm autodidactic and iconoclast. I'm going to think about things in a way that they will not. And I think I have something to offer. And so that was one of my points, was to get on your show specifically to discuss about this, because I know who your audience contains, who's in there. And because I want to basically offer some insights and some further thinking about this, because I'm now actively engaged. I know who the enemy is, and that's enough for me. I was born a warrior. People that, I have two astrologers, okay? Two individuals I've shared my birth date and time with. These two individuals are incredibly trustworthy and I can trust them up until the point of my death, and that's as far as I need go, because they'll never reveal that. But they'll both tell you, one is sidereal and one is Western, and they'll both tell you that I was born basically as a strategic warrior, somebody that understands strategy, and born with a warrior attitude. And I believe universe has placed me and everybody else here at this time because of what we're going through. And so I just wanted to offer to help with some interesting aspects of thinking about some of this that I don't believe that they would encounter elsewhere.
Right on. This has been incredible, mind expanding like always. And folks, be the change you want to see. And I think Clif is doing that right now. So we'll leave it at that. halfpasthuman.com. Subscribe to Clif's YouTube channel as well. I've got his links in the video description box. Be excellent to each other, everybody. And watch out for the insects.
Exactly. Yeah. Watch out for the bugs. Live long and prosper.